Hello, welcome to the 14th webcast of the PBC Morning Dawn Study Group from Padmasambhi Ling, Venerable Khenpo Rinpoche's monastery in Sydney Center, New York. Today we'll be discussing chapter 14 of the Khenpo Rinpoche's book, The Buddhist Path, and the title of the chapter is called Shamatha and Vipashyana. So we'll begin with our usual opening prayers, and then we'll go into the discussion. Thanks so much for joining. Samatha Vajrasattva, Pramadvajra, Sri Singha, Padmakara, the 25 king and subjects, Sol, Nun, Yang, and the 100 Tirthans and others, Lamas of the Kama and Terma lineages, to you I pray. The supreme tradition of the glorious Buddha Padmasambhava, which is the essential, extraordinary view and doctrine of the early translation school, you keep alive and spread by the light of wisdom. Lord of Dharma, great Khenpo, I pray at your lotus feet. In the palace of the Ogmin Dharmadhatu, the essence of all the Buddhas of the three times, the one who shows clearly the Dharmakaya of my own mind, we pray to the Honorable Root Guru, glorious Root Teacher, precious one, dwelling on the lotus seat on the crown of my head, hold me with your great kindness, and bestow the accomplishments of body, speech, and mind. Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi, Om Marapasanadi. So chapter 24 of Shamatha and Vipashyana begins on page 71 in the Buddhist Path. And I'll give a quick summary of the first half of the chapter according to the Khenpo Rinpoches. The Rinpoches begin by saying that all the different meditation instructions given by the Buddha have one purpose, to reveal the true nature of the mind. Which meditation instruction works for oneself depends on one's own mind at that time, but all the instructions work together to help us continue on the path until we reach enlightenment. When we first begin to meditate, most people find it difficult to rest the mind, so as primordial wisdom can shine through. The mind is restless and constantly moving. First, we sit with a good posture and remain focused. Although the Buddha taught several techniques for calming our grasping mind and revealing its wisdom nature, two of the best known are Shamatha and Vipashyana. Shamatha, or calm abiding, is a meditation technique we apply to maintain our mind in a constant, unchanging state of focus. Keeping the mind still and alert allows the natural clarity of the mind to shine forth. However, most of the time our minds are moving wild like a hurricane, which isn't calming and oftentimes causes the body and speech to create a lot of conflict. Although it is difficult to calm the mind, it is possible with joyful effort and courage. Everything in Dharma and life requires perseverance and follow-through. It is important for us to believe we can achieve this goal and then to work towards it until it is accomplished. With steady, continual effort, enlightenment is possible. There are many stages of mental development and calm, but whenever we can maintain a focused awareness, for that moment the mind is calm and peaceful. This relaxes our body, which relaxes our mind even more. To practice Shamatha, calm abiding, begin by sitting in the 7-point posture of Buddha Vajrayana, or at least have your back very straight. Keep your breathing normal. There are two types of Shamatha practice, Shamatha with an object of focus, and Shamatha without an object of focus. Shamatha with an object involves focusing on a physical object like a statue or crystal, or visualizing an object like a sphere or a syllable. You can also follow your breath, maintaining awareness of inhalation and exhalation as they happen. When your mind wanders, bring it back to the object of your focus. Shamatha without an object has no particular focus. It is just meditating on emptiness. So here we'll go to the first topic question.
When first learning to meditate, most people find it difficult to rest the mind so that the primordial wisdom can shine through. Thoughts continuously arise, one after another, like waves on the ocean, and the mind is constantly moving. It helps to begin by sitting with good posture and then to remain focused. There are several techniques in the Buddhist tradition for settling the mind and uncovering wisdom. Two of the best known are Shamatha and Vipashyana. The Sanskrit word shamatha is made of two words, shama and ta. Shama means peaceful or calm, and ta means letting or abiding. So shamatha means letting the mind be peaceful. Shamatha is also known in Sanskrit as samadhi, which is also two words put together. Sama means motionless and di means holding, so samadhi refers to maintaining one's mind in a constant unchanging state. For example, if you fill a bowl with water and do not touch it, the water does not move, it stays still. Similarly, when your mind rests single-pointedly, undisturbed by thoughts, it becomes calm. In this state, the mind is concentrated and focused. This means that the mind does not move or change. It is solid like a mountain. Maintaining the mind in a state of stillness results in clarity of the natural mind shining forth. That's from page 71, second and third paragraphs.
I had a thought kind of around shamatha, which was, I was just wondering what people thought about kind of a calm, peaceful mind is so nice to have, but then also, I know for myself, sometimes I have a nice, calm, peaceful state of mind that maybe isn't so much shamatha. So, like, I don't know, I just thought if we all just thought a little bit about it, like kind of distinguishing how just how a peaceful, calm mind relates to shamatha, and how shamatha brings us maybe a step further. I'm not sure exactly how to phrase my question, but just kind of like, what's the difference between just being nice and relaxed and calm and shamatha meditation?
Maybe it has to do with it seems like a calm, peaceful state of mind may be a little bit dull, or just kind of just not necessarily have like a sharpness to it or a clarity of mind. And I think maybe that shamatha has a little bit more of that, really in the sense like they're talking about in this point that Isaac read, that it's about abiding and kind of holding a state of mind. So I think within that holding, or like that focusing of the mind, brings sort of more of a clarity, rather than just kind of like, feels good. I don't know, seems like that maybe is.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, too, I think, and that degree of concentration aspect too. There's it's just interesting how it's kind of so natural we can relax, but then also, like you said, there's that dullness aspect, but then that relaxing, but then that other aspect of shamatha, concentrating, and like that kind of more. But what were you going to say, Blackbird?
I think there's a big distinction between relaxing in our habitual patterns, or relaxing according to like our grasping mind with all of its preferences, and then versus like relaxing into this natural state of awareness or non-grasping mind. And similarly with shamatha, we can focus or fixate according to our habits on all kinds of pleasurable things. Usually when we feel relaxed, we're definitely holding on to or running after a pleasurable object that will cause us to feel relaxed. But with shamatha, as a meditation technique taught by the Buddha, we're seeing that in the present moment, we're holding on to an object that's actually going to help us lessen the turbulence of our surface level mind, of all of its strong emotions and thoughts. So in one case, like the more feel good kind of, or concentrating kind of under pressure, usually that's really related with just habitual mind, just our common way of understanding things and of really kind of obsessing on things that we prefer, versus the like seeing through the habitual mind and anchoring our awareness on an object with the intention of like actually stilling the turbulence of our habits so they can become more refined, so that then our non-habituated wisdom awareness or non-grasping mind becomes more apparent or shines through more clearly.
One thing too, just thinking of it, is the term relaxing. A lot of time that I've spent with different people doing body work, they really kind of hammer home that difference between what's relaxing and what's releasing, because relaxing can be, you kind of like just flop your body and you just let everything go, whereas releasing is, very specific about you're letting go of certain things. In this case, I think it's more, echoing what Drakpa was saying, you're kind of, you aren't completely relaxing the body in Shamatha, you're keeping this posture so that way you can release a lot of that grasping and that clinging. So just that subtle word shift over into what exactly are you releasing, and then exactly as Drakpa said, we're looking at stilling the mind, for the purpose of what's our goal, that bodhicitta, that refuge, that motivation. So releasing anything else, kind of a thing.
And I think too that the relaxing aspect, depending on how it is, can be more actually like Vipassana. I mean, I know we haven't really talked about that so much yet, but like Nyusho Kenrinpoche, one time he said his first experiences of like the nature of mind was when he was like a sheep herder, and just like looking up at the sky, like totally relaxed but open, and but anyway, just that I think there's a difference between like relaxed, like daydreaming and kind of just like what everybody's saying, normal habit patterns, and then
Nap time.
yeah, hammock. That's a great place to do shamatha by that definition. But anyway, and then that kind of concentration where you really recognize when your mind has wandered from the object, and you bring it back to the object that you're, and you keep bringing it back to the object that you're focusing on. So normally that's not what we do relaxing.
That mindfulness aspect.
I mean, I think a good point to say with this is that we're all responding and like saying, well, what is shamatha now? According to the Buddha's teachings. And then Rinpoches are really clear is that the shamatha practices or concentration practices existed long before the Buddha came into this world. I mean, there's many, many kinds of concentration practices. I mean, in a more worldly sense, like if we look at those terms, on the back of this study guide, there's the 3 types of concentration. The first is worldly concentration, which is just developing a capacity to remain focused on an object over a period of time. And that could be something like hunting, or it could be something like watching TV for 6 hours straight, or being angry with have an object of anger in mind for a long time. It's like any concentration is saying irregardless of what the object is or what it cultivates in your mind. Like there's all kinds of it's like a culture of concentrated activity in a way. Our mind is kind of jumping a lot too. But it's just to say that this shamatha techniques are non-liberative techniques of meditation that don't necessarily lead to enlightenment. These concentration techniques existed long before the Buddha was around, and they can lead to more temporary states of peace. It says in that definition, the worldly concentration leads to a temporary state of peace. Because I think it stays in the habitual type of, it works with our own habits. It's not uncovering their deeper nature or refining them to be less turbulent. But so we're answering this question in the context of the Buddha's teachings of what is shamatha and a path of enlightenment as being the final goal for ourselves and others. I think it's a good point to make that distinction.
Also, from a practical perspective, you can't hunt for long enough at a time to achieve full shamatha, or you can't do some other activity that people might consider to to be sort of relaxing.
Mm-hmm.
Generally, you can do it for long enough to, for a length of time you need to meditate to get shamatha.
And that's and time-wise, one of the renowned measures of shamatha is 5 minutes. One of the renowned, like, kind of big milestones. If you can hold your object for 5 minutes without wavering on any other thought, then you're starting to get pretty good shamatha. So that's kind of a good, because that rules out a lot of things, Just as far as, the goal is like really to place it in your mind, and it stays on whatever you place it on. That shamatha with focus, And I thought to mention too that one of the most renowned ones too, like you made the distinction between shamatha as like a normal worldly technique and shamatha in Buddhism. But sometimes, I forget exactly what they call it, but oftentimes an object of shamatha is like the Buddha's face, or an actual statue. Yeah, the third eye spot of the Buddha. And that's really a renowned aspect of, the shamatha in Buddhism. When you have a holy object of the Dharma that you focus your attention on. As opposed to a rock or a flame or the breath or whatever. So, I forget exactly what that's called.
It's interesting too. It reminds me of a teaching I was once hearing where the particular teacher was talking about, he was talking more about aspects of the mind and saying, how vast it is, and how if you have like a piece of metal and you've turned it into like an ashtray, you're not showing a lot of respect to it. But say you took that metal and made a statue of the Buddha, for other beings to kind of come and venerate, that you're putting that material with this beautiful intention, and filling it with this beautiful intention, and kind of imbuing it. And it seems almost the same way with the shamatha. Or maybe more so the focus. You can focus on something, and it could be something like an ashtray, and that focus is a disrespectful focus. You're taking something that you no longer want and kind of flicking it into it, or you're using your focus in a way that brings those beautiful qualities, that brings the people to have that peace around you and things like that. And in that same way, it's what's the intention you're imbuing into your focus is another way of distinguishing.
And just that ability, I think, like you were mentioning, that's such a major step, and to have that stability of mind where we're not getting distracted, where we can settle our mind on one object to focus in an open, relaxed manner, and then just as a foundation for looking deeper into, maybe into the Vipassana things. Or like, Rinpoche's mentioned this in the chapter too, but the whole reason calm abiding, it's kind of implying that we're just doing the opposite most of the time. So just kind of that, or like the metaphors too of like taming a wild horse, like when you get the wild horse and you stake it, to a spot and learned, just that it's such a major movement for us to actually, of course when we try to do it we see, but then it is possible.
Yeah, I was just going to, on that similar point, I wanted to just highlight on page 73 in the middle paragraph, there's just this nice, really kind of short example of the courageous effort that is so important when we're, particularly I think when we're beginning to meditate, and just kind of seeing how the movements of the mind and the bumpiness and kind of maybe that tendency to think, oh, I'm never going to be able to do this, or like, how could I possibly meditate, and then, so they're really talking about like the importance of patience and courage and joyful effort, and just continuing and, recognizing the importance of it, and that it is possible, so they give this example of a mountain, and that, a bodhisattva told some people that if they really tried, they could just totally take down this mountain and reach enlightenment. And so some people maybe tried a little bit and they said, this is impossible, and gave up. And then some other people really worked for a long time and just kept going and doing it, and then they did achieve enlightenment. So anyway, I mean, it's a, you know, that metaphor of a mountain, taking down a mountain, I mean, it's a big task. So, I mean, we have all of our, I mean, speaking for myself, you know, so many habitual patterns and like karmic tendencies for so long that it may seem really difficult in the beginning, but just really trusting and having that joyful effort and you know, oh, this is really good, this is something really important, and seeing that value and moving forward is really so important.
Right. And again, kind of in each session too, we're looking at this one chapter, but it's also all in this whole book, and you know, that aspect too of our practice. We're kind of, in a way, our conversation's been going maybe a little bit more around the mind element to shamatha, because of course that's the queen bee. But then these other things, like we've gone over those 5 supports for our meditation, and then the winds and channels. I mean, just setting up all those conditions, as well as the view that's introduced early in the book, and just how all of those things are taking play here.
I wanted to also mention with shamatha is it is about staying presently aware in what's happening right now. There's a lot of type of focuses where you zone out, and you're like one-pointedly zoned out. And the shamatha is about being able to intentionally place the awareness, as you were saying, Andrew, and hold it there freshly, presently, vibrantly there for as long as you want. And then the overall point of the shamatha, at least in Buddhist, according to Buddhist teaching, is so that we can, it doesn't mean so that we can just keep our mind fixated on something for years and just not have to deal with all the trouble in the world, because we can kind of just only pay attention to this one thing. But it's about developing that ability to intentionally place our awareness and really penetrate in and see something really thoroughly without our mind just having to just jump away and be distracted. So it's developing that capacity to intentionally place the awareness. And then all problem solving in all aspects of life, or dealing with relationality, relationships, we have that capacity that we can then apply in these different circumstances and be more thorough, more complete in how we're engaging with what's happening.
One question I had about shamatha is, I know for many people, you know, it's beneficial to do things like walking meditation, mostly because it's a way of including it into like a way of going about your day, you know, as you're doing things, as you're going different places. You know, walking meditation is something you can just say, okay, you know, I'm going to this next meeting, but you know, for all that space in between, you know, I'm allowing myself to just walk. Is that a form of shamatha, or is there a way that shamatha could be used throughout a day? You know, in that way where it's just simply coming back to the breath for a little bit of time, in imbuing our life with mindfulness, or is it more distinct and needs more structure?
Maybe both.
Okay.
It's definitely shamatha is holding an object in mind.
Yeah.
Mindfulness is you're not necessarily holding an object in mind, you're aware of what your mind is doing. So it's kind of two, shamatha is a technique you're intentionally applying, and mindfulness is awareness of what the technique is, and am I applying it correctly right now? Or what am I doing right now, the mindfulness. But there's all kinds of objects like Zen koans. People try to hold that one koan in mind all day long, even while they sleep. It is like a shamatha style that breaks through into vipassana, seeing the nature of what is the inconceivable meaning of the koan, breaking through to non-dual mind. But so that is a type of holding. Anytime where we have a good intention, holding something in mind, kind of trying to release our grasping, then that's a shamatha in the sense of Buddhist practice.
So even like if say for people in our tradition, if we were just reflecting on, say, a nugget piece of wisdom that, say, Rinpoche, you know, advised us on, and then holding that wisdom throughout the day, would that be a form of shamatha that, you know, no? No.
I don't think so.
Not really.
No.
Not technically.
No.
Usually people are still when they do shamatha as a practice,
Okay.
I think, to distinguish
And-
between mindfulness and awareness and alertness. And
It's related. We should probably go on to
Yeah.
this next Vipassana section, but it's related with different levels of the teaching.
yeah.
They use Shamatha and Vipashyana in basic Buddhism and in Mahayana and in Vajrayana, and they mean different things. The definitions of them and the techniques you use are different. But so there's an overarching, you're holding an object, that's a Shamatha thing. You're releasing, you're holding, and you're just relaxing or abiding, that's the Vipassana side. But it's different in each level of the Buddhist teaching. So real quickly, just our time's going by a little bit, I'll summarize the second half of the book, which is more related with the Vipassana meditation teachings of Kama Rinpoche's. They say the second meditation technique is called Vipassana, or supreme seeing, where you examine your mind, where the mind itself examines itself and its source. To practice Vipassana, you also sit with good posture and normal breathing, then look directly to the mind itself. When thoughts and emotions appear, look for where they come from and where they go. The instant the mind looks to itself, the nature of mind is revealed. Then simply relax in this nature effortlessly, confidently, knowing there is nothing to gain or lose. The true nature of mind itself is already present and cannot be changed. Maintain your awareness in its natural state, and all the divisions we create by grasping onto thoughts dissolve into great equanimity. This nature completely pervades your mind and everything you experience. Vipassana penetrates the surface level of mind where we grasp onto thoughts and directly sees the insubstantiality of all outer objects and inner experiences. We see that all distinctions between subject and object are ultimately empty of true existence. Shamatha is the basis of Vipassana, though Vipassana goes beyond Shamatha, since it transcends all duality. Vipassana leads to liberation. When we maintain awareness of the natural state, that is effortless Shamatha, the union of Shamatha and Vipassana. Those two techniques of Shamatha and Vipassana are taught both in the Sutrayana and Vajrayana teachings of the Buddha, though they're more related to Sutrayana, which includes basic Buddhism and Mahayana. Vajrayana includes the Sutrayana and is the complete teaching of the Buddha. In Vajrayana, Shamatha is taught as creation stage visualization, and Vipassana is taught as completion stage dissolution, where everything is seen to arise from, abide within, and return to the nature of the mind.
So, the second quote is from page 74, the first full paragraph, and page 75, the second full paragraph. The second type of meditation is called Vipassana. Vipassana is a Sanskrit word made up of Vi, meaning extraordinary, and Pasana, meaning seeing. Literally, it means extraordinary seeing, but it is usually translated into English as insight or supreme seeing. Vipassana goes further than maintaining a calm and unmoving mind. In Vipassana practice, you examine the mind and its source. By penetrating the surface level of thoughts and emotions, you see that their insubstantiality is the true nature of the mind. This is the practice of extraordinary seeing, in which you realize that everything arises from great emptiness, and that the true nature of the mind is unborn, unceasing, and free from concepts. When the mind relaxes in its natural state, all of the usual perceptions of solid existence are experienced as nothing more than a dream. This is the great equanimity free from mental fabrications. By Shamatha, one maintains the mind in the natural state, and by Vipassana, one sees that all appearances are insubstantial emptiness. Success with one of these practices supports the development of the other, but the result of Vipassana meditation is greater than that of Shamatha.
So what's the main difference between Shamatha and Vipassana?
One is holding and one is not holding.
Can you say more?
In Shamatha, try and hold an object, but in Vipassana you don't hold an object.
You look to who's holding.
Yeah, it seems like maybe with Vipassana it's looking more, and of course they kind of mentioned here, like for example, thinking about thoughts, looking at the nature of that thought. Well, where did it come from? Where is it now? Or the mind itself, like, where is the mind? Whereas Shamatha, maybe we're gaining some stability and everything's kind of in a natural flow and peace and everything, and there's that stability and clarity of mind and able to focus. But then maybe that object, in a way, and that was a question I had, but I don't want to jump the gun a little bit, but the way mind in a way is looking back at itself, or the essence, the essence of all of these appearances that are shining forth, like just, and maybe really tangibly seeing how it is insubstantial, whether it's through our intellect and logic or like a more direct meditative experience. So it is letting go, but there's that vivid quality to it, seems.
I think almost in like basic Buddhism, in Mahayana too, so all Sutra Mahayana is the sense of a subject holding an object in Shamatha. And as it's talked about in those traditions, in Sutrayana, there's a me, sense of self, holding an object, sense of not self. And the Shamatha technique is always in that framework, even if it's a more subtle object. It's still within the sense of a subject apprehending an object. And the Vipassana aspect is seeing before the mind filters, or before the mind holds itself into a subject-object framework, or duality mind. Before that happens, or when that happens, then you apply one of these Vipassana techniques which say, okay, this is arising, a thought, or an object, or whatever, and the mind looks at, where is that thought? Where is that object? Where is this mind? And Rinpoches are really clear to say that Vipassana isn't a contemplative, intellectual investigation or analysis. In Buddhism, there's those three types of wisdom. You hear the teaching, you contemplate the teaching, and then you apply the teaching with meditation. So then you come to see the nature of relative and absolute truth directly, without intellectual mind. So here Vipassana is very clearly this third level of wisdom, this direct experience of how your mind is before the mind filters into a subject-object type of awareness. So once it's in that type of duality framework, then the mind looks back to itself, and then right after it looks back to itself, you release the looking, the holding. So, because if we just investigate, then it's shamatha. Or it's a contemplative type of wisdom. It's still within duality mind. But this Vipassana, that's really clearly, Vipassana was an extraordinary teaching of the Buddha. And it's actually what didn't exist at the time before the Buddha came. And that was the complete path, Shamatha and Vipashyana together. And it's the Vipassana part that's liberative. It sees the nature of the perceiver, of the grasper, of the holding, and releases that entirely.
I had a quick question, just practically, in terms of like a beginner possibly starting out. Is it possible, like say they read this chapter and they're thinking about how do I start practicing this? Can you just start with Vipassana, or is it like always? Do you always have to start with Shamatha? I mean, I asked that question too. From in the chapter, they say the technique for Vipassana begins the same as with Shamatha, with good sitting posture and normal breathing, and then you look into the mind itself. So it's almost like you just jump into the technique. And I'm wondering if that's recommended or okay, or depending on the practitioner, just...
You have to have some stability of your mind in order to be able to look. So there has to be some, I think there has to be some shamatha first before there's a Vipassana.
Yeah.
There are probably different schools of thought of how much shamatha you need.
Yeah.
There's some that feel like there's a natural concentration that's very simple, and they go more quickly to Vipassana. And then there's some that really build it up. And then there's some that really build it up.
In sutra, like the common, like the very profound, like essential Sutrayana teaching of the three trainings, Shila, Samadhi, Prajna. There's a whole chapter we went over on this. Ethics, concentration, wisdom. It's always taught in that sequence in the Sutrayana teachings. First you have to get your outer conduct well. Then you start to look in the mind, and the mind, which is still grasping mind, starts to get more stable and calm with a concentration technique. And then once it's more calm and stable, then that concentrator, the looker, the awareness looks at itself with wisdom. So that's the Vipassana side, or Vipassana, or Vipassana, or however you pronounce it. But in Tantrayana, or in Vajrayana teachings of the Buddha, they always talk about Shamatha and Vipashyana as a union. So this is a big difference. Like here at the very end said how concentration is usually talked about as creation stage in Vajrayana, and then Vipassana is usually talked about a completion stage. And then when we approach them as a unity, then that's called Dzogchen, or great completion stage. So it's like a lot of concepts saying here, but it's the difference is in the Sutrayana, we go from duality mind, and then we kind of try to penetrate into egolessness, selfless awareness. But in Vajrayana, we start by trying to see the non-dual wisdom awareness, or of the three samadhis, the first samadhi, the suchness samadhi. We start by trying to recognize emptiness right off the bat, and then we try to naturally sustain that recognition. And that's the shamatha side. The shamatha side is just sustaining, the effortless sustaining of our awareness of the true nature. But we first see the true nature.
So in other words, starting with Vipassana and then continuing with Shamatha.
Yeah, and so that's seen like within that larger framework of the Buddhist teaching, this 9 yana teachings. The top 6 yanas are all Vajrayana. They're always based on Sutrayana. So even that way is a gradual approach where we have to develop the Sutrayana first and then enter into Vajrayana. And as it's more traditionally taught, like we would definitely have put in a lot of time in Sutrayana practices and before getting into Vajrayana. But they say too, the nature is just the Rinpoche say in the chapter, the nature is what it is. It's already there right now. We can see it, and like they give teachings, public teachings where anyone can come and get these instructions. But in terms of really developing through that, as it says here, it takes time. And like so, even if we have these direct pointing out instructions, then to actually apply them in a way where we can sustain that as a meditation practice takes a lot of time, and a lot of obstacles come up, and because all our grasping has to be released. So either way is for almost everyone have to be a gradual approach. Have to have a solid foundation, then we build to release everything.
And I thought on a related point with that, if you just have shamatha and no vipassana, it's a small point, but you could even strengthen your ego,
yep,
and your sense of grasping even more. And they said that happened a lot. Many people would get really good at shamatha and spend a long time on that, but then when they come out of retreat, they're even more egoic and strong than before because they didn't have the vipassana aspect of turning back on the mind itself and see the insubstantiality aspect. So they just solidified the mind as being very sharp, but it was the egoic tendencies.
And then we also have that bodhicitta, that aspect of Mahayana too, of bodhicitta, where we're thinking not only ourselves but all beings, and equally with that becoming more and more familiar with the emptiness of everything.
And I think another way to talk about the distinction between shamatha and vipassana, or this concentration and insight, is with shamatha we're really holding an object at the exclusion of all the other things happening. Whether it's one object, a small object, an imagined object, a set of objects, we're holding a set of something and we're not paying attention at all to all the other stuff going on in the world and around us. So it excludes all of these things. Whereas Vipassana can be talked about as actually investigating the relationality of the holder and the holding. Like you're trying to expand the sense of relationality of the, and so it comes more to the flexibility of mind, not just an ability to stay frozen or stay fixed, but to actually see the relationality between objects, including the one who's aware of the objects. And so it gets into that emptiness as a definition of dependent origination, that it's all relational. Emptiness can be said to be just utter relationality, like the realization of utter relationality. And if we're applying a technique where we don't see the relationality between things, or only looking at a small set of relationality, me and that, then it's a big difference between Shamatha and Vipashyana.
We've come to the end of our session time.
It's good to say, this is a big topic. All the meditation instructions of Buddha Shakyamuni fit into Shamatha and Vipashyana. All the levels of the teaching fit into those instructions. We just have a short period of time to talk about these, but even at the Beyond Vajrayana, Dzogchen has its own way of talking about Shamatha and Vipashyana, or their union. And if you look at like Khyber Rinpoche's books, like they're pointing out the nature of mind, their books, they talk about all these different levels of instruction. And they say one level is there's an effortless union of Shamatha and Vipashyana. At a more gross level, we make the division between the two, and we have to feel like we have to combine them. At an even more gross level, we might not even think that Vipashyana is true. What do you mean it's all true nature, balanced, perfect already? So we really have to anchor into Shamatha first. But it just really depends on what our mind is. There's all these techniques that really talk about how Shamatha and Vipashyana fit together differently, but it's just, I wanted to emphasize that we didn't exhaust this topic by any means. This is like total tip of the iceberg. I mean, it's so profound.
Right. And the best way is to actually practice it. I mean, but that aspect too, how here in the book, I mean, that we've given so much of the view, but like how special it is when we actually, with our own minds, sit down and like remember as much as we can of the teachings after having thought about them and understood, and really apply in the meditation on whatever level we're doing it. But just that's such an important distinction too, between, like Khenpo Rinpoche says, between letting it hover, kind of all of these treasures hovering, or this feast before us, or someone's, but actually engaging, letting it settle into our mind and heart. We're actually taking foot upon the path, and we've gotten all of our supplies and our instructions and our tips, but then to actually go ourselves, it's so special. Om Swasti Vidzayantu Chosum Sasum Chitu Penmaju Ninde Sode Tuje Tujinji Kinchin Balin Cherab Jubeku Nujo Tendro Zezan Tachin Chok Om Swasti Choku Nanta Bunku Chenrezi Choku Ajun Yapyum Tuje Tu Vela Bazan Jacho Gyansika Tendo Bende Dundu Nyurchar Sho Kari Rawe Gowe Shinkamsu Vendan Dewa Madu Juwede Chenrezi Wan Tenzin Japsohi Jabe Kaji Badu Tenjoji Om Swasti Sewang Rigzin Peme Jinachi Dunyi Drupe Laksan Nodena Sheru Golo Sumji Bajote Sanchen Natan Jode Namja Sho. By this merit may all obtain omniscience, may it defeat the enemy wrongdoing. From the stormy waves of birth, old age, sickness, and death, from the ocean of samsara may I free all beings. The precious bodhicitta, in those without it may it be generated, and those who have it may it never diminish, but always continue increasing.